Alright, so I don't think you need me to tell you that Dragon Ball Super so far has been kind of silly. Like GT before it, it has a lot of people split in the fan base as to how to feel about it. A lot of people think it's just not very original, feeling like it's more focused on baiting the audience with nostalgic moments, and is nothing more than an empty shell of what Dragon Ball used to be. But then there's also the side that sees the potential a series like this has. A chance to elevate the characters we know and love to heights unseen in the series before. And honestly, I can see both sides. If you ask me, Super is an incredibly mixed bag that has some of the absolute worst Dragon Ball material I have ever seen. But at the same time, it also turns me back into being that kid sitting in front of his TV, pumping his fist in the air, experiencing the pure excitement that only Dragon Ball can deliver. Seriously, try me. I can recite the entirety of Goku and Frieza's makeout session in the bubble. And speaking of which, I'd say the Tournament of Power is the best example. You've got some f***ing awful shit in there that just makes you feel ashamed to be a Dragon Ball fan. I'm looking at you, sniper. But then you've also got some moments in there that are just Still, overall, it left me optimistic about the future of Super. And, as we all know, the anime would go away after that. And we haven't seen it return since. So, instead, we had the manga to fall back on to keep up with the story. Now, personally, I thought there was no way the hiatus would take longer than like a year, maybe. I figured that Toei would hard focus on Broly and then go back to making their cash cow. So I thought I'd wait it out because whatever they did would show up in the anime soon enough. Right? That, and I'd heard that the manga was kind of hit or miss in the first place. Not like the anime isn't.
What the f*** is this piece of sh**?
Little did I know that we'd still be starving here almost 5 years later. So, in my fashionably late style, I finally caved in and decided to hop on that wagon. I somehow managed to avoid most spoilers, and hadn't seen any opinions or thoughts on this arc to try and savor the whole story for myself. Following up the Tournament of Power arc, the first original arc of the manga had a lot to live up to. And after having read it, I can happily say that this is probably my favorite Dragon Ball Super arc thus far. Now, does that mean it's perfect? No, not at all. Despite this arc's many victories, I still feel like there are many missteps and what I can only call super-isms that keep it from being a must-read. And to go into detail with my thoughts, I'm going to issue a spoiler warning here since I'll probably be talking about the arc in full. So if you still need to read it or want to do so, there you go. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the Moro arc. First of all, let's talk about the background behind this arc. As usual, the manga was a collaboration between Toyotaro and Akira Toriyama. Toriyama in charge of making and overseeing the story, while Toyotaro actually illustrates it and crafts a lot of the designs. Though of course, everything has to go through Toriyama first before being finalized. So while it might not be his hand at work directly, it's still mainly his vision being carried through. And his vision this time around was pretty different from what we'd seen before. The whole idea going into it was that they wanted to have a villain who was pure evil. Somebody who you'd look at and just think, holy shit! And with that, Moro was born. And he's sick. Being an original design by the AF man himself, he looks nothing like a traditional Dragon Ball character. And personally, I think that's a great thing. Instead of going with a super generic, muscle-bound monster, we get this sinister design that leaves you wondering what this guy is all about. Since they wanted him to look super evil, Toyotaro took inspiration from Western-style demons and threw the Grim Reaper's cloak on him for good measure. And while you might take a look at this old wizard and think, what, this bitch? Let me tell you, anybody with the tagline, the consumer of worlds, is not somebody you want to f around with. And as Goku and Vegeta soon come to realize, the more you f around with Moro, the more you're gonna find out. While he might not be the strongest fighter around, it's his cunning and resourcefulness that make him such a fearsome foe. He's the kind of character who always has another trick up his sleeve whenever you think his back is finally up against the wall. And I'd say his devious ways make him the most interesting villain Super has had up until this point. His story began millions of years ago, after his power had become too massive of a threat to the universe. The Kais decided to take things into their own hands and face off against him to end his reign of terror. Overwhelmed by his magic and on their last legs, the Grand Supreme Kai was able to seal off Moro's destructive magic and successfully defeat him. Without his magic, he was then locked away by Galactic Patrol, sentenced to death, but with nobody strong enough to kill him. Guess we couldn't get the Super Dragon Balls to wish for a super guillotine, I don't know. So he sat there, waiting for 10 million years, until one day, when he would finally break free. So already we've got somebody who can challenge literal gods, who could only defeat him because of a technique one of them pulled out of their ass. So, as you can see, Goatman don't f around. Well, he eventually escapes with the help of Cranberry, who might just seem like your average run-of-the-mill Frieza soldier. And that's probably because he is. That said, it's actually kind of cool they decided to throw him in here because he was an actual part of the Frieza arc way back in the day. The manga shows him being casually bitch-kicked by Zarbon, and then brought back to life by the wish to resurrect everybody killed by Frieza and his men, incidentally setting the events of this arc in motion way long ago. And this also explains why Moro knows about the Dragon Balls. While it's not super significant or anything, I appreciate they decided to take this route with the fan service. To go on a little rant here, one of Super's shortcomings, especially in the early stages, was their heavy reliance on nostalgia. And while some of these uses are better than others, it can feel like this crutch that Super was too afraid to let go of. But this arc, it feels like we're finally expanding outward to what Super can be. Granted, I know someone's gonna bring this up. I know a lot of people think that Moro kinda feels like a copy of King Piccolo. And honestly, I just don't think that's a fair comparison. They're both old, wicked, and use the Dragon Balls. And that's about where their similarities stop. No, Moro did not wish to become younger. The reason I say I don't think that's a fair comparison is that when you boil a lot of these Dragon Ball villains down to their core, they're gonna sound exactly the same. Here, watch this. Which character is the cruel, heartless tyrant whose lack of respect for life leads him to torment all under him? Is it A, Frieza, B, King Piccolo, or C, Zamasu? Bro, I'm talking about King f***ing Moai, if anything. I'd say he's more like if Babidi was the main villain, but even then, that's a stretch. Moro plans to head to Namek, find the Dragon Balls, and wish to restore his full magical abilities before the Galactic Patrol can catch him. Moro is no match for the Saiyans in terms of power, but where he does have a leg up is his magic. Like a reverse Genki Dama, he can steal life energy from the planet and its inhabitants, which include Goku and Vegeta. So Moro sucks them off so hard that he pops them out of their god forms, and then proceeds to kick their asses. And so, after Cranberry uses a wish to heal himself because he's a ninny, Moro then has his wish granted, kills off Cranberry, and uses the last wish to free everyone held in the galactic prison. And with them out, Moro and his crew go around the universe, recruiting planets for Moro's consumption. It's almost upsetting how they bring back Pui Pui with a planet full of him, only to get completely slaughtered. Once a jobber, always a jobber, huh? And might I say, by the way, it is really cool to see a character do a galactic conquest storyline. Sure, you might have your Friezas and stuff like that, but seeing it happen in real time and having every minute that Vegeta and Goku aren't fighting him mean that billions of people are being killed is pretty different from the rest of Dragon Ball Super in the fact that there's, you know, consequence. Meanwhile, Goku and Vegeta go their separate ways to train and find a way to defeat this menace. And that's another thing I really like about this character. strength alone is not enough to beat him. In a series all about surpassing your limits, I'm glad we decided that not all those limits had to be physical. Vegeta goes to Yard Rat of all places to hopefully learn a technique capable of defeating Moro. Meanwhile, Goku trains with the angel Merus to try and overcome the physical and mental barriers to perfect Ultra Instinct. And both these pieces of training would end up being essential to Moro's defeat later on. But since they take almost a month to do this, Moro has just been eating planets up and is now a Giga Chad. And of course, he eventually finds his way to Earth and fights the Saiyans once more. And this is a pretty big display of just how f***ed up he really is. My dude has such little regard for life that he decides to have a goof and perhaps even a gaffe at the expense of one of his henchmen, Saganbo, constantly imbuing him with more and more energy until he can't take no more and pulls a hero killer stain before becoming a stain on the floor. Vegeta is able to do some massive damage to him using his Force Spirit Fission technique that forces Moro to leak out all of his stolen energy, making him look like a dingus again. But right at the point of defeat, he goes to Plan B and absorbs one of his henchmen, 7-3, a robot man thing that Moro made a backup of himself in. And the way that he absorbs him? Into the pie hole and down the gullet, bro. And I'm not gonna lie, this is where things started to get a little worrying for me. Remember how I talked about Moro's design and how much I liked it for being way different from any old stereotypical Dragon Ball design? Well, he comes out the other side looking like, oh my goodness! As somebody who can say Cell is their favorite villain, it'd be a real shame if they decided to rehash him without what made him so special in the first place. Boy, I sure am glad that never happened. But yeah, it's not a bad design, but it just loses that it factor for me that made me like his character design so much in the first place. Luckily, it's still Moro, but with a mediocre facelift. If there's gonna be one point of critique for not being original, it's the next point where Moro finds his inner Frieza and pleads for help after being beaten to hell by Ultra Instinct Goku. And of course Goku is like, yeah, you're good, bro. Just make sure you go back to the prison. Oh, and here's a sensu bean for good measure. And I think we all rolled our eyes at that point. Even Jocko was like, just kill him already! Of course Moro is like, bet. And immediately goes back on his word saying he'll go back after Goku dies by his hand. Oh, always with one more stunt to pull. He ends up being the first villain to gain access to Ultra Instinct after stealing the ability from Merus. And when he realizes his body can't contain this godly power, he pulls a funny card and decides to fuse with the Earth. Looking humana hot. Which is a nice callback to both earlier in the arc and Goku using Ultra Instinct in the Tournament of Power. Goku needs even more power and gets energy from the Z-Warriors. And when that's not enough, he gets some extra from a special little somebody I was not expecting to see in this arc. Finally putting an end to Moro once and for all. Oh, and Goku summons a Susanoo out of nowhere. I don't know. Overall, he's just a really fun antagonist, man. You never knew what to expect from him, and always at the last second when you thought, okay, he's finally dead, right? He always found a way to come back. Not to mention, I really have to hand it off to the guy. Moro is absolutely relentless. Despite being a powerful magic user, he wasn't afraid to throw some hands, handily beating the Z-Warriors time and time again, even when they had the upper hand. Híjole. Oh, that looks bad. You actually feel worried whenever he's on the panel, which is something I can almost never say about Super. He's not above using underhand... Okay, that one was an accident. He's not above using dirty tactics, and in the arc alone, probably slaughters billions, if not trillions of people. And you actually felt like Goku and Vegeta were in real danger for once. He forces our heroes to grow and evolve beyond just pushing their physical limits, and I love it. Speaking of character evolution, let's talk about Vegeta. Like many, Vegeta is my favorite character in the series. Starting off as a heartless brute with a chip on his shoulder, he's changed to become a lot more than that. Protecting those around him and even making a rival out of Goku to surpass him. And this arc really adds to his character. On Namek fighting against Moro, he reminisces on his past actions. Having slaughtered countless Namekians in his quest for the Dragon Balls in the past, and feeling remorse for his actions. And remorse is not exactly a trait that I'd say the old Vegeta would share. He even ends up asking one of the elder Namekians what they thought about him after he killed one of their villages. The elder replies that while they haven't forgotten, they choose to forgive to preserve peace on their planet, only further boosting Vegeta's resolve to protect Namek from Moro. Not to mention, Vegeta has always been a character to make it a point to defeat his enemies with his strength alone. So it's very unexpected when he decides to go to Yard Rat and train with them, using their abilities as his edge against Moro. He even says he detests using such a technique, but if it means defeating Moro, then so be it. He is actively putting his pride away to protect others. You know, the one thing he swears by and never doubts. Even in his second fight with Moro, Vegeta tells him that he's no hero. He understands full well that he's still a villain, working to atone for his sins. Super has done a really great job at evolving Vegeta and making him a completely different person from the one he started as. From My Bulma to the fantastic scenes of him being a dad, he continues to become a better and better man. And even his moments of weakness, where he places his pride in his rival, are some of the best moments Dragon Ball has to offer. And it only excites me to see where he goes next, as his story continues. One character I have yet to really touch on thus far is Merus. He is a galactic patrolman who is way out of everybody's league, and, I mean, he's an angel. Anybody with eyes can see that he's an angel. And he's an interesting part of this story. While not on Whis' level, right? That man stops a Super Earth Moro hit with a finger while hardly paying attention. He has some impressive outings here that make him a highlight of this arc. He also becomes Goku's teacher after being defeated by Moro on Namek, helping him understand the fault in his control of Ultra Instinct. It's also learned that Merus cannot use his angel abilities in mortal affairs. Otherwise, he ceases to exist. So, of course, we see him do exactly that in his fight against Moro, which, at least to me, was a pretty effective scene. This would allow Goku to achieve his true Ultra Instinct form in this fight, and finally put Moro away. Not only that, but at the ceremony they hold at the Galactic Patrol, Merus actually turns back up anyway, revealing that he's actually Gucci and is just immortal now. So it's possible that we'll see Merus again. And I'd be very interested to see what else they have in store for him. Aside from that, we've got some other pretty solid character moments going on here too. After all the bullshit they pulled with Majin Buu over the last few arcs, man, it was incredibly satisfying to see him not only fight Moro, but absolutely squash the man. Legitimately just bringing the smack down to him in a way that we haven't seen Buu do since first showing up. Turns out the Grand Supreme Kai being within Buu gave him a little boost in this fight to actually keep up. Is he still hitting him after he's stopped hitting him? Then you've also got moments like Gohan and Piccolo teaming up to face off against 7-3. And then later, next to all of the Z-Warriors showing up to fight against Moro's escaped convicts. People like Tien, Master Roshi, and hell, even Yamcha gets to kick some ass. But don't worry, he gets his ass handed to him shortly after. And what's so nice about seeing everybody here is that it really helps add to the scope of this arc. You really feel like the Earth is preparing for war against this threat. I know many people have complaints about the story of this arc, and in some instances, I can see why. For example, there are a lot of people that feel that Moro is a pretty bland villain overall, just being this old goat dude that's evil for the sake of being evil. And I can't really debate that. He is nasty, and super fleshing villains out and giving them purpose has not really been its strong suit. What I can say though, is that they didn't bother wasting our time and pretending like they had anything to flesh out with him in the first place. And besides, Moro's mystery is part of what makes him such a compelling villain, if you ask me. He might not have that depth that many other villains have, but the fun factor he brings to the table, I think makes up for a good bit of it. Some people seem to also have an issue with the pacing of the arc, especially when they were reading it as it was being released monthly. This is something I can't really say I dealt with because I read it all in one go, and despite it being the longest arc in the manga, I thought it had a pretty solid flow that kept me hooked from issue to issue. The only time it ever lost me was whenever the f***ing Macaroni gang showed up. Like, yeah, they were a neat way to show off a bit of Merus' power, sure, but his being able to capture both Goku and Vegeta, you know, literal gods at this point, I think told us plenty already. And then there are points where we're just dicking around with them in space for too long, which could have easily been cut out. Like, 7-3 could have just gone to Earth, it's not that hard. Although, the fact that this guy's god-given name is Pasta Macaroni is f***ing hilarious. Honestly, even the ending, which I know a lot of people have an issue with, I enjoyed a good bit. Even though Moro's design here do be kinda stinky, he's still Moro through and through, and still hits us with even more surprises after that point. And since I didn't know where else to squeeze them, here are some other quick points I wanted to talk about. The Dragon Balls. Man, I am glad to see these things being used for once in a way that isn't, "Can we please bring everybody back to life?" Instead, Moro asks for his sealed powers to be fully restored and creates this neat little cliffhanger wish that releases everybody from the galactic prison. It's a nice little twist that I didn't see coming, and adds an extra threat that the Z Warriors have to overcome. Disclaimer here, I don't read a ton of manga. If I'm being perfectly honest, it's more of a recent kick. That said, I think the artwork here is pretty great, and the way the story is told from panel to panel, I thought was really well done. I'd forget I was reading a manga so often because I was visualizing all the gaps between the panels so easily. It flows from one scene to the next pretty seamlessly. And if there's one critique I'd give here, it's that I'd love to see more double page spreads to give those big moments that extra that I feel some of them needed. But overall, Super manages to find its footing with this arc, and it stands out to me for being the most well-balanced, action-packed, and most importantly, fun arc so far. And in my eyes, the best one we've gotten yet. That said, I think it's only fair to say that while I've been praising the hell out of this arc, and while I think it's great for Super standards, in the larger Dragon Ball pantheon, I'd go to say that it's just good. I know I can't say it hits those emotional peaks like the Cell and Frieza arcs do, and Moro himself, while fun, had the potential to be a lot more. Anyway, this was supposed to be like a 10-minute long video, and I keep on finding more things to say, so I'm just gonna end it with this. Toyotaro had said that working on this arc was very intimidating, especially since they didn't have the guideline of the anime to follow. They had that luxury with the arcs prior since the anime was ahead of the manga, so they definitely had a challenging task ahead of them. And all things considered, they managed to pull it off, and made something that many people have come around on over time. Which, funny enough, is what the entirety of Super has been doing all along. I think it's fair to say that our voices are being heard, and there is an active attempt to make this series its own. So I can best describe this arc as the first right step towards reaching those incredible moments we know this series can deliver. And besides, at least it's not GT. Good night, everybody!